So yep, real quick, just a reminder as always to subscribe and like and all of that so we can reach 600 and stuff, make a lot of Marvel and DC videos, and I'm also going to have a lot of uploads coming up over the next few days so that I can catch up before the new episodes, because I'm quite behind on my videos at the moment. But yeah, a reminder if you didn't know is that Superman and Lois actually does go on hiatus for a good while after the next episode. So after this week's episode, which is season 1 episode 5, the show was going on hiatus till May. So yeah, from next week on, Supergirl Season 6 is going to be airing alongside Flash until Supergirl Season 6 gets to episode 6, I think, which will be about mid-May, and then Superman and Lois is going to come back for the rest of its run in mid-May, around May 18th, I think, which also around those episodes, I don't know where it's either episode 6, 7, or 8, will be the one that Diggle shows up in, David Ramsey as Diggle, so that brief crossover, which will be really, really, really cool. But yeah, so there's that coming up, which is unfortunate, but COVID's causing a lot of those kind of stuff. I think all the shows are going to have some kind of big hiatus. I know Black Lightning's on one at the moment, Batwoman will be on one after the next few episodes, and then Flash is probably going to have one at some point as well. But this was a true honorary episode of Smallville, honestly. Like, the show has really kind of towed the line between being a genuine sequel to Smallville and not. And this was the first episode that just was, yeah, Smallville would have done the same thing. Smallville did do the same thing. We basically have meteor freaks now that Kryptonite is making, or is giving people powers in Smallville. So Tag kind of got powers. He had very similar powers to Tony Todd in Smallville's episode Jitters, which I think was season 1 episode 7, but very similar powers to that. It was hard to kind of tell what kind of powers Tag had. At some points it looked like he had super speed, and at other points it looked like he just had super strength, and at other points he just looked like he was having trouble holding his status kind of thing. But yeah, this was a very solid episode. It's likely my least favorite out of the 4 we've had so far, but it still was very strong and had a lot of strong points, which is just proving how good this show is, that it's staying consistently strong. Like, we can have weaker episodes that are still much better than what we're used to getting. A lot of this episode focused on Morgan Edge. The very beginning of the episode had like literally a meteor storm that was very similar to as meteor storm we saw in Smallville a load of times. But yeah, it was kind of a cool little flashback to see what he was up to 6 months ago. I'm not entirely sure what that was that he picked up, whether that was like Lara's DNA or something, or maybe Lara's only 6 months old, maybe something like that, like she's been grown in a lab or something, because in the comics Lara is a Supergirl villain. She's from the City of Kandor, and I really, really, really can't see them doing a City of Kandor arc this early into the show. I think Lara's going to have a much different origin story, and she's probably going to be gone by the middle of this season. I don't think we're going to see much of her. But yeah, it's kind of hard to tell who is the main villain at the moment, whether it's Captain Luthor or Morgan Edge, because Morgan Edge, while he does seem to be Lois's villain of the season, while Luthor is Superman's villain, it's kind of seeming like Morgan is getting far too big to be just Lois's villain. Now that he's making Kryptonians pretty much. He's got a literal Kryptonian on his side. It seems like this is something that's definitely going to have to come across Superman's radar. So I wonder if maybe Morgan's going to be dispatched by middle of the season, and then it's going to be Luthor full for the rest of the season, or if it really is going to stay as Lois against Morgan while it's Superman against Luthor. But it's really cool nonetheless. We had a side villain, or I guess a one-off villain for this episode in the shape of Thaddeus Kilgrave, who is a comic book character, a very, very, very obscure comic book character, but it was cool to see him. He was actually played by the same actor who played the Star City Slasher in Arrow Season 7. He was the guy in the prison with Oliver for early Season 7. Then he killed Daniel Brickwell, and then he ended up breaking out of the prison and coming after Oliver and his family. He's a great actor. He was great as a Star City Slasher, and he was great in this. He didn't seem like the Star City Slasher. He didn't seem like the same person. He seemed like a very new character, so I really like that. Just more crisis things changing people's faces, I guess. But I loved how in the final battle, Superman was getting absolutely destroyed by him, but then he used smarts over brawn, and he just did the big Kryptonian clap, which is just like what Kara did in Crisis on Earth X against her Kryptonian doppelganger from Earth X, which was really, really, really cool. Sam Lane came back this episode after being absent last episode, and he also had a pretty interesting arc where I don't know what he was doing at the Kent farm. Was he trying to just get Clark back on his side, and then when he realized that Clark was going to do his own thing, that was when he decided he needed to come up with a contingency for him. Because I know that did feel a little bit flimsy to me, that his whole thing was that if Clark didn't choose to go with him, that he would assume then Superman could become evil. I don't know, that was a little bit weird, but I did like a lot of his scenes. His scenes with the boys especially were really, really, really good. The fact he has a contingency plan for Clark now by episode 4 likely seems like he's also going to be some sort of an antagonist or villain later on. I love the scene where he was telling Clark the military is scared of him, that he's the only reason the military isn't, kind of going after Superman, and that it would be good to have him escort Thaddeus Kilgrave as kind of a show of good faith, and that people aren't recognizing him in the Metropolis skies anymore. I really did like that line, because it makes sense. Superman was likely saving people every single day in Metropolis, and now he's more so spread across the world than just in Metropolis, and people are noticing that, which is a cool thing to do. We also got some references to Intergang, who in the comics they're a criminal organization who are very tied to Morgan Edge, so it was only a matter of time before they showed up in this. But they've been referenced a couple times in Supergirl, I'm pretty sure. So correct me if I'm mistaken on that, but that's pretty cool. Then X-Kryptonite as well, which is another thing taken out of Supergirl. That is kryptonite that just gives people Kryptonian powers for a short amount of time. So that's cool, they're bringing that in. They're bringing in a lot of elements from Supergirl, which is only fair because Supergirl has stolen a lot of things from Superman, so it's cool that they're kind of switching between the two. Lois and Chrissy, who is the person who owns the Smallville Gazette, they have a really interesting storyline as well, going after Morgan Edge, and I really did like Lois's outburst to Clark, where she was like, I don't have a right to be angry, but I am angry. This was so important to me, why couldn't you be there? That was a really realistic conversation between the two. It felt like both sides of the story were being considered when being written, that they weren't trying to make one side right and one side wrong. They weren't trying to make one side completely irrational and make one side kind of someone you loathe, which is what the Arrowverse does have a problem with. Anytime there's kind of this relationship drama, it happens on Flash with Barry and Iris, it happened on Arrow with Oliver and Felicity. They always kind of make one side be completely irrational, and you're kind of thinking, why are they talking like this? That didn't happen here. I completely understand why both characters were saying the things they were and were acting the way they were. I just really loved how Lois was trying to understand Clark's point of view and Clark was trying to understand Lois's point of view. It was great. Speaking of realistic drama, John and Jordan, there is more of that stuff, and Jonathan is definitely starting to get more jealous as the episodes go on. I think he's, by the end of the season or pretty soon, he's going to stop being so understanding, and he is going to have a big outburst. But at the moment, I think it's realistic. It's not too much, but at the same time, I think it would be a little bit weird if Jonathan was just okay immediately with Jordan being the new king of football. So it makes sense to me that Jonathan is just a little bit more annoyed every time he sees Jordan do something like that. And both those characters are still proven to be such an asset to the show. I'm loving both of them. We also found out there's a metahuman school in the Arrowverse, like an X-Men school, maybe something like that, which is something I don't think we've heard talked about at all in any of the shows before. So that really does open up a lot of storytelling potential. I'm not entirely sure if they are going to revisit that, but I think that if they choose to, it's something that could hold a lot of story. And there were still absolutely no Arrowverse references in this episode. Again, just another point that they really are kind of considering this a soft reboot for the shows. I'm very intrigued to see how they work the Diggle crossover in, just because so far they really have been acting like this is a show off on its own with no ties to anything else. So I'm really interested to see if when Diggle shows up, if it really is going to be kind of like very subtle. He's going to be treated as a new character on the show, like he's the same character we recognize, but the way the dialogue is written is very open for people who haven't watched Arrow, or if they do straight up play it as a crossover, it was like, oh my god, it's John Diggle, you work with the Green Arrow and all of that. But it'll be interesting to see. I'm also interested to see how they work the soundtrack with that, because Blake Neely, who doesn't do the soundtrack for this, he always made sure that when a character from one of the other shows showed up, we would get a little tiny hint of that character's soundtrack in the current show's soundtrack. Like anytime Barry would just speed by on Arrow, like for a cameo, we would get a little hint of the Flash theme. And so far, I'm forgetting the guy's name, but the composer for Superman and Lois has made everything completely unique and new to this. So I'm not expecting like a tiny bit of the Arrow riff whenever Diggle shows up, but if they do that, I would absolutely love it. But yeah, still a very solid episode. The show hasn't exactly had a weak one yet. Just they're getting a little bit, tiny bit less exciting, I want to say, but I'm still absolutely loving everything they're doing. But how did you feel about the episode? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Please remember to subscribe so we can hit 600, and I hope you have a great day.